You're in a good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Today I want to talk about perspectives. I want to talk about a perspective with a simple subject about a dog. Having a dog, not having a dog, can't see your life without a dog, or can't see your life with a dog. And it's interesting how this type of philosophy and psychology and understanding other people's perspectives directly relate to every single thing that we come into contact on our day-to-day life. Better yet, one of the biggest problems we have as a society is misunderstandings. Being confused and misunderstanding what someone else is conveying, what their message is, and why they believe this way. I find it very interesting because when somebody makes a comment and then we interpret that comment and we put value on that, but not only do we place value on that, we also place judgment. And not all of us are out there judging people left and right, but sometimes the judgments can be subconscious. It's not at our conscious level. And we make these judgments based on what somebody tells us, not necessarily understanding their perspective and what happens. We end up having a little misunderstanding, possibly some confusion, and eventually, we let go of the relationship because we just don't see eye to eye. But on today's show, I'm going to expose how, in reality, we can always see mostly eye to eye in most situations when we allow and understand where other people are coming from and take away that misunderstanding and allow for some sort of clarity. So let's begin today's show by me illuminating what I'm getting at. I figured that having a dog or not having a dog is a very simple subject matter that we can all enter, and we don't have as much emotional feeling on the table. And some of us might, but for the most part, we can understand the subject matter. We can look at it from 10 to 11 different perspectives in today's show. And this will give you not only insight into everybody that you come into contact with, but it will also allow you to use this technique when it comes to absolutely any subject whatsoever. So let's begin our discussion on dogs, not cats. We're talking about dogs today on Live Your True Life Perspectives. And so let's begin with the first perspective that some people have about dogs. Never had one. Okay. So let's look at that. You'll hear people in a conversation, especially for dog lovers out there. You'll be like, hey, do you have a dog too? I got 2 dogs, most amazing dogs in the world. Yeah, one's a mix, got them at the SPCA. Other one's full-on terrier, totally crazy spaz terrier. And you know how those are. And the person comes back and says, no, I've never had a terrier and I don't have a dog. Never had one, don't want one, thanks. And your thought process in the beginning is like, what? Well, what the heck's wrong with them? Never had a dog. Huh. Yeah, okay, I wouldn't trust them. Better not turn my back to them. But, it might not be that extreme, but you begin to question the validity of that person. Okay, what makes them never had a dog? And you have to kind of get past that first comment. Oh, never had one, don't want one. Oh, why? Why? Usually, you'll have a comment back, well, my parents never had one, my mom or dad was allergic or something like that. Or we never lived in a home that was big enough for a dog. That could be one too. I mean, if you've constantly lived your life as a kid in an apartment and there was no room, that's a situation right there that's obvious. Also, we don't really think about how the way people were raised. Okay, the way people were raised. Oftentimes it has nothing to do with them, but their parents initiated the process and the thought process of never having a dog. Oh, you'll never have a dog, for whatever reason. Either they didn't have a dog or their parents didn't think that having a dog was good, or maybe they got bit by a dog a long time ago and ever since then have been scared of dogs and don't want to say scared of dogs but don't want a dog. So when you think about it, when somebody says they've never had a dog, which way do you go with this? Do you go with, oh my God, what's wrong with them? Or, I wonder why they've never had a dog. I'm interested. And I've learned in life that we can't ever assume anything. Because the reason somebody did or didn't do something is predicated on historical reference, meaning their background, their history, everything they've been through. It's predicated on their parents, right? It's predicated not only on history, but on their parents and upbringing. The way you were brought up directly relates to how you are right now, unless you've done a lot of personal development and a lot of soul searching and perhaps seen a therapist or a life coach and diligently dedicated time to learning about yourself. Unless that's the case, for the most part, we are complete products of our upbringing. That's why people say stop the cycle, discontinue the cycle. And it's the same thing as, with anything in life, whether it's abuse or neglect or what have you. When somebody goes through a cycle of that, parents went through it, they saw their parents go through it, their grandparents went through it, they saw their parents go through it, they go through it. Even though they don't want to be that way, what happens? Well, it happens because they don't have the tools and they haven't looked and searched out the tools to overcome that cycle. Does that make sense? And so, because they haven't looked for the tools to gain to better their life, they're going to follow in the same footsteps no matter how much they might hate the idea of turning out like one of their parents or their grandparents or whoever brought them up. And I think it's interesting if you really took this thing, it doesn't have to be about, hey, do you have dogs? No, I never had one and I don't want one. That can apply to almost anything. I mean, think about it. And how many times have you been in a conversation where the first thing that comes out of their mouth is like a never or no way? It's very interesting because it's almost like a door closer. It's so adamant and so negative that you don't really know where to go from there. And why would somebody begin with that? Either they have a close emotional tie to the situation, or they might not have any emotion to do with it, or they want to end the conversation right there. And usually that's the case because they know it's going to be a turnoff. Very rarely are you going to, when somebody says, no, never, I never want one, never had one, never want one. Very rarely will you come back after that conversation and say, so why? Did you have a bad experience with a dog? Or was it your upbringing? No, most people will be like, oh, okay, well, hey, you have a good day, okay, or whatever, see ya. And I think oftentimes in any situation, that's the kind of person that if you have a little bit of time, it's interesting to dig into that scenario and kind of get a little more information. It's very interesting. It can be somewhat rewarding. And if you're a person like me, I mean, I know I do this for a living, but if you're a person like me who really likes to delve into psychology and what makes people tick, this is something that starts an interesting conversation. You begin to understand characteristics, body language, all kinds of stuff by asking a simple question as simple as, do you have dogs? Okay, do you understand what I'm saying? And this is a great conversation opener, and you learn a lot about the other person. The next perspective you hear about the dog situation is, no, I'm allergic to dogs, can't have them. And, for some of us dog lovers, you sit there and go, well, it wouldn't matter if I was allergic or not. And some of you are like, I am allergic, but I still have dogs. I would rather be medicated on Benadryl all day long than not have my dogs. Okay? But that's because you found the love of the dog, you love the dog, you understand how awesome the unconditional love is with the dog, and it's something that matters to you. And because it's something that matters to you, you'll go to all ends to better yourself, to make that still a reality. I've had friends that literally have gone to allergists and had shots every 10 days so that they could live with their dog or cat. It was that big of a deal. And I would do the same thing. I am a little allergic, but it doesn't bother me enough. Like that love and that unconditional love and having that kiddo at home supersedes it. It supersedes it. And if I could have more dogs, if I could have cows and pigs and all kinds of stuff, as pets, I would. But I don't live in a place that allows that. But when I do, eventually I will. But I think a lot of times when we hear somebody say allergic, you could either say, oh, well, okay, you can just say you're allergic to anything. That's fine. And some of you might say, ooh, well, that's a problematic situation. You could, have you could go into some sort of shock or die. You start seeing the worst case scenario. And others of you are like, well, it's a health condition, hence why they don't have a dog. And so I think the way that we look at things is directly proportional to our life and the extremes that we've gone to do things in our life that we might not have been able to do if we would have just followed doctor's protocol. Stay tuned. Check out the website, ashleyburgess.com, ashleyburgess.com, and live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess. Will be back I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
Turn it up and jump in the deep end on Perspectives. Now, here's Ashley.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Today I'm talking about an interesting subject matter. I'm talking about thinking about different perspectives when it comes to a simple subject and how those different perspectives actually relate even with talking about deep subjects. And this will directly relate and help you understand when you're dealing with somebody's responses, what they mean, but also get a little deeper by understanding their perspective and understanding where their perspective actually originated. Okay? Because that's the bigger thing. You can hear somebody make a comment. Do you understand the context? Do you understand why they said what they said? Do you have a little anger? A little kind of angry about their response, or kind of feeling like it was cold? Okay? And the thing is that the colder the response, the more interesting it is to dig into it, because they're trying to avoid a discussion with you. They want to shut the door immediately. They don't want to discuss. And so those can be some of the most interesting discussions if you're willing to spend the time and willing to have those discussions. However, I think most of the time in situations, we have a tendency of when somebody throws up that wall, we have a tendency of just, well, okay, see you later. When sometimes that can be very interesting, and you can get a lot of intel if you continue the conversation. Today, I'm talking about having dogs, the different perspectives people have, and the different responses people give you, and how that directly relates to where they are and how they were brought up in their life. Right before the break, I was talking about how people respond with, no, I've never had it and I never will. And also that second response, well, no, I'm allergic and I can't have a dog. Those are 2 very interesting responses, and we talked about that earlier. And so I want to talk about the third response. I've had them my entire life. I've always had dogs. Very interesting. So that's somebody that was raised around dogs, someone that's always had a dog. And for that matter, that means that the parents or the people that brought the child up, was cool with having a dog or several dogs. And even maybe those parents were brought up in a household with animals. Okay? And that's always very interesting, because when folks have children and they never had an animal, a pet, they're less likely to have or to be willing to have a pet with their child. And on the other side, I think most of you out there that do have dogs and were brought up with dogs, you know the value that a dog offers a child, and how important it is for children to be brought up with animals, and how imperative it can be for them to understand not only unconditional love, but for them to have responsibilities, right? The responsibility that they need to feed the dog, and bathe the dog, and give the dog clean, fresh water, take the dog out for poopies and pee-pees, and all that kind of stuff that goes with it, and how important and how much leadership that builds for a child. I know me, when I was younger, when I was born, we didn't have a dog. My parents had a dog prior, and the dog passed away. It had a disease. It was really kind of quite sad, actually, and the dog was a sweet dog. And it was like some sort of type of cancer, and it was very fast spread, and they couldn't save the dog in time. And so fast forward, I was, I think, about 6 or 7 years old, and I woke up one morning and I wanted a dog. And by the end of that night, and I wasn't a spoiled child. Okay, my dad wanted a dog. I think my mom wanted a dog. I really wasn't a spoiled kid. I really wasn't. And it's kind of funny how this happened. I ended up getting a dog. By 9 o'clock that night, we had a dog. And I remember she threw up on me in the car because she got car sick. I can remember it like it was yesterday. And I love that dog. I still love that dog. That dog passed away, but I still love that dog. That dog's name was Snuggles. And I couldn't have done something better with my kid. You know, being that I look at my growing up, I was the only child. I didn't have any brothers and sisters. And Snuggles was a little girl, and Snuggles was like my sister. I mean, Snuggles was like my little sister, and you know, Snuggles really taught me about caring and love and all that good stuff that really just is pretty phenomenal. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. And so when people say they've had dogs their whole life, oh, I love dogs, I think a lot of times they were raised in that type of environment. You know, and I think on the other end, when people say, no, I never had, never will, I think they were raised in the opposite environment. Probably parents are saying, no, I'd never have a dog. We're never going to have a dog. No, stop asking me for a dog. You're not getting a dog. You know, they're dirty animals, or they're very expensive, or we can't afford to have one, or you don't want one, or you won't take care of it. All those things. And so when you're thinking about just the perspective of having a dog or not, think about how this type of thought process, when you stand in other people's shoes, right? And you kind of you can understand why they make other judgment calls in their life. It's very interesting. You know, the next comment that you'll hear from the dog folks is, oh, God, I'm a dog lover. I'm a dog lover from way back. I love dogs. And that's somebody that truly loves dogs. Somebody that's been raised by them or made the choice to have dogs on their own. Maybe parents didn't allow them, and they went to the other side, you know, and decided, hey, I'm not living my life anymore without this dog. And I think dog lovers are the people that obviously know the love that comes with the animal, taking care of them, the fun side of it, just the loving part of it. And a dog lover honestly has been around dogs, loves dogs, and a dog lover is usually somebody that's been through. When people say I'm a true dog lover, not all the time, but a lot of times, majority of the time, they've been through the death of a dog that was their best friend, mourned that death, and went after it again. Because another reason why some people say that, you know, oh, I'm never going to have a dog again. That's another response. I'm never going to have a dog again. Well, why? And people go, oh, well, was it something bad happened to the dog? Or the dog chew up the house? Whatever. And a lot of times, yeah, that could have been it. But a lot of times they couldn't deal with the grief of losing the dog. Okay? Because some people, it's hard for them to get past the death of that dog, and they don't want to go through that pain anymore. They don't want to do it again. They can't do it again. They won't allow themselves to do it again, even though I would rather go through it and experience all the love of it and have it while it's around. Some people can't do that. And that's very interesting, too. You know, you hear people often after they've been married once or twice, and you'll ask them, well, will you get married again? They're like, oh, no, I don't think I could go through it, and I don't think I could deal with the death of a spouse again, because they're not willing to go through it. And the interesting thing is we're all going to die from this particular position in life right now. And so not being able to spend time with it is a little interesting. I think if you go really existential in what I'm saying, when somebody is unable to do that, they haven't really grasped what we're doing here. Okay? They don't have the emotional IQ, people call it the EQ, emotional IQ, to deal with it. Okay? They don't have it. And it's sad because we're all going to leave this particular situation, every animal, every plant, every human, okay? And would you sit there and just be alone in a room and by yourself because you don't want to be around anybody that's going to die or anything that's going to die, so you never want a plant in your house, and you never want an animal around you, and you never want a spouse or anybody or a friend because they're all going to die. Everybody's going to leave me. And yes, eventually they will. But don't you want to experiment the fun and experience the happiness while you're there? And some people haven't gotten to that level. Some people would rather avoid the pain than deal with it. And some people use that as a deflection. I lost a dog. I can't ever deal with it. And they might be feeling like, yeah, I lost a dog and I love that dog, but I don't want to deal with having a dog again. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of cleanup. It was a lot of money. I don't want to say that, so I'd rather just say, hey, I'm really sad about losing that dog. And then everybody normally lets people go on the death card, right? You're not going to sit there and push somebody, oh, come on, man, you can get another dog. I mean, come on, man, that's weaseling out. No, you're going to be like, oh, man, I'm really sorry that, your dog died, and that's awful. And even though it happened 15 years ago, I get it. But, to some degree, it could be, they're deflating the whole concept, and it's not about the death of the dog. They just don't want to deal with having a dog again. And other people really haven't gotten over the death of that dog. My father, for example, is a good example of not being able to get over the death of a dog. And I don't know if you had anybody like this in your family or friends. And God bless them, but I had that dog, Snuggles. Snuggles was my best friend. And when I went to college, my freshman year, I wanted to bring Snuggles, but they wouldn't let me bring Snuggles. Okay, so back in the day, they wouldn't let you bring dogs to college. Anyway, okay, so Snuggles was living at home. Well, anyway, Snuggles got depressed because I was gone, and sadly enough, she got really depressed, and I think she started getting sick. But my dad took it upon himself to go to the vet and decided to put Snuggles down. Now, why? I still don't know. He still won't go into the complete communication about it. He still holds this against me, kind of. And we're good friends, and he loves me, and I love him. But it's like he still is very angry about having to go through this process. And I've had to do this several times with dogs that were dying of cancer and what have you. And it was painful. But I was able, after grieving, I was able to deal with it. And be able to kind of let that anger go and that sadness go and be able to be around and have another dog. And when we return, I'm going to be talking more about that. I'm going to be talking about more other perspectives based on having a dog and how this directly reflects on everything we talk about in life with other people, our communication, and better yet, our misunderstandings. Stay tuned, because Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back this time. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
This is Jake Busey, and you're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Today I'm talking about the perspectives that various people have based on the concept of having or not having a dog. And I know this might seem a little elementary, but this type of thought process and brain strategy directly relates to really almost any and every conversation that we have on this planet. One of the biggest things that happens between two humans that can ruin a friendship, a relationship of any sort, is a misunderstanding. And misunderstandings happen almost all the time. And when a misunderstanding happens, rarely do we ask for clarity. Instead, often we just take it for face value, make a judgment call, and we move on. And we wonder, my God, why did I spend so much time with this person? We have nothing in common. And you start wondering why you were even around this person to begin with. And so let's go back to our subject matter, because when you listen to it and you realize where I'm going with it, you'll realize that this really does directly relate to every single situation in your life, and how you can really begin to understand and read between the lines and ask the right questions when it comes to any subject matter. So right before the break, we were talking about dog lovers. Well, right now I want to talk about, when somebody says, that they lost a dog, if the dog died, how painful that can be. We were talking about that right before the break as well. And it's very interesting, because when somebody's lost a dog, it is very painful. It's like, to me, it's like losing, anybody, a best friend, a parent, anything. That's from my perspective. I mean, some people could say, it has nothing to do with that. That's not at that level at all. But from my perspective, losing a dog is like losing a parent, a brother, sister, a best friend. And I think that from my perspective, that's where I come from. And so you'll have other people that are like, man, you're really extreme. I mean, like, it's an animal. I mean, they die. Other people would be like, how dare you say that? That was my best friend. And other people are just kind of like, well, it is what it is. And where does that come from? Where does that different value come from? The value that we place on something? Well, it comes from our upbringing. It comes from our heart. It comes from how deep we allow things to get. It's really directly how we allow other people and other things around us and how much we cultivate that relationship as well, but also how emotional and deep can we be, right? And how much are we willing to feel? How much are we actually willing to feel within ourselves? You know, it's interesting, too, at what time of life was somebody's first dog, okay? And how that directly relates to their thought processes on dogs. So let me explain. So if your first time in life to get a dog was when you were 5, okay? Well, actually, let's start back. Let's rewind. If your first time to have a dog is you were born and there was a dog, okay? Or 5 to 7 years old, you get a dog first time. Or, you know, you end up getting married and your spouse has a dog, okay? Or you have kids and the kids grow up and leave the nest and then you get sad and you'd like to have somebody take care of and you get a dog. Okay. So there's different stages in life where people get a dog. Now, some people have a dog at every stage of their life, and that's a different story. That's a complete dog lover, somebody that their whole entire lifestyle is based around dogs, and that's awesome, and I totally understand that. I've had a dog since I was basically 6 years old, and I've taken care of every one of my dogs. They have died from old age. As far as cancer, you know, it comes to a time when, you know, unfortunately, you know, when they've lost 25 pounds and, you know, and they're dying. And my last dog before Buddy passed, and I was holding him when he passed. Besides my dog before that, which was also my husband's dog, which became my dog too. So there's like this whole generational thing. But there's some people that didn't get a dog until after their kids leave the nest, and so they become like their kids. Do you see what I'm saying? When you have children and animals, it's like it's kind of like a tribe, right? If it's just you and your dog, it's like your buddy, right? You see what I'm saying? It's very interesting how this all kind of flows. And if it's a married couple with no kids, it's like their child. And I think that's interesting. Like, you'll see people say, well, my God, I can't believe they bought that dog clothes. Or, oh, my God, they're getting the dog another collar. Or, it seems like they're always buying something for that dog. Well, do those people have kids? Probably not. And if they do, the kids are grown up and out of the house. Okay? Seriously, unless their kids are just real jerks and the dog is like the superior. But no, you see what I'm saying? And there's these different stages in life where having that dog and being around that dog means so much and where you are. And I remember when I was single and I had Dolce, and I love Dolce. Dolce is awesome. And Dolce was my pal. I mean, he was my boy, you know. He was my boy Blue, and I love that dog so much. And, you know, it's interesting. We were pals. I mean, you know, we'd eat together, we'd hang out together, watch TV together. I mean, and that never changed. Even when I met Greg and we moved in together and he had a dog too, which is perfect, it never had to change. I mean, the dogs would hang out together, but I still got to spend time with Dolce, and I got to spend time with his dog named Alex too. And so it was really cool, and the two dogs got along, and it was picture perfect, because sometimes dogs don't get along, okay? Especially when they've been used to being the only dog for a long time, and it can be very hard and overwhelming for a dog. It's like having a child, and then you bring another child into the world, and the child's like, wait, I thought I was good enough for y'all. Why do you have to go out and get more dogs, right? And it's interesting when we have a dog at a different stage in life, how that dog and what that dog means to us. And it's also interesting how you become friends with other people in that same timeline who also have dogs who are in the same situation. And it's interesting to see kind of the camaraderie, right? The camaraderie. I have a lot of friends who their kids are out of the nest, already graduated college, on their own, and they went and got a dog. And some of them are divorced and some of them are still married, but that dog has replaced the need. It's the empty nester, and it's not always a replacement, but it does help because it gives the person something to take care of, somebody to take care of, and that sort of thing, and it really goes a long way. And it's interesting how you see that group of people as well as you see the folks who are single and they have the dog and they've had the dog the whole time, and how connected they are with that dog. They get home after work and they go on a jog with the dog, or they walk the dog. And how interesting it is when they do meet somebody, if that other person does have a dog, how much better the whole situation seems to be. And one other last perspective before we go into what to do with this information and how to overcome misunderstandings in your life is the person that has lost most of their family. Family has died. Their spouse has died. Okay? And they find a dog, whether they adopt a dog or they buy a dog, and that dog becomes their world. And I'm not making light of this. This is very important. That dog becomes their outlet to being in this world because husband or wife has passed on. Maybe they didn't have any kids. Maybe the kids are far away. They have their families now. And this dog or dogs come in and become their whole family for the most part. And when you talk to somebody like that, I mean, it really puts things in perspective. But when somebody from that perspective comes into contact with somebody that never wants a dog, never had a dog, or I don't have time for a dog, do you see how the misunderstandings could flare up? Do you see how the person that has lost their spouse and has very little family, and their dog is their family, how they wouldn't understand where the person that doesn't want a dog and doesn't have time for a dog is coming from? Can you understand how that misunderstanding alone, how that interpretation really, okay, how that interpretation alone can literally get in the way of communication with that person, and how they may find little to communicate about in the future because it doesn't make sense for them to communicate because they have absolutely nothing in common from that perspective? And do you see how that happens often in communication and communication breakdown? And do you see how it happens when you're dealing with people often, when you're having communication about something and their response is so opposite of yours that oftentimes instead of sitting there going, hey, explain. I want to understand your point of view. I'd like to know. And maybe their point of view doesn't corroborate with yours. Maybe their point of view is quite the opposite. But wouldn't it be interesting to understand what their point of view is? And wouldn't that give you more insight into the fact, do we have communication? Can we communicate? Can I understand where they're coming from? Do they understand where I'm coming from as well? And I think that if we allowed that communication to come about, we would end communication breakdown, but we would also clearly understand where someone else is coming from and be able to understand their perspective based on historical reference. Stay tuned because Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in 2 shakes.
You could be my luck. Get in here. You're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Today I'm talking about perspective. I'm talking about the simple perspectives based on the concept of, do you have a dog? Do you not have a dog? And the reasons why people have dogs, or how they feel about dogs, at what stage of life they have a dog, and those kind of things all in between, and how understanding someone else's perspective and understanding why they replied or said what they said directly correlates to everything we do in our life, and directly relates to how we understand somebody, how we don't understand somebody, how we get confused, how we have misunderstandings, and how we have permanent judgments that stand in the way between relationships and friendships. And it's interesting when you think about something as simple as somebody saying, hey, do you have a dog? No, never. No, I'm never going to have a dog. Or somebody saying, man, my dog is my best friend in the world. I mean, without my dog, I'd be completely lost. I love this dog. It's my best friend in the world. Okay. Two extreme responses. And these extreme responses happen in almost every conversation and everything in between. So you have less extreme, and you can understand better some, explanations, and others you just cannot fathom. But when you think about it, this happens in almost every conversation. And how often does this happen that you basically put the wall up as well in the conversation and it's a done deal. You're over it. You're out of it. Next, that kind of sort of thing. So let's talk about how to let go of these misunderstandings and how to use this concept to better your life and to better your life situation. The first thing is that when you think about other people's perspectives and you ask them questions and have them open up more about their response instead of placing subconscious judgment, we have a place of reference with that person. Okay? So you get to learn a little bit more about that person than maybe they were wanting to talk about, or maybe just opening up that line of communication allows you to understand them. So, for example, the next time, let's just use the dog example again, because you can just fill in the blank when it comes to any of this. Instead of talking about dogs, you can talk about something totally different. But, hey, do you have dogs? No, never. Okay, your response is, oh, why? Why have you never had dogs? And the person might kind of be kind of thrown back because they thought they were going to stop the conversation and be like, well, I just don't have any. I never have, never will. Well, why not? And eventually, if you ask a couple more questions, you're going to find out the truth. That person could have never been raised by dogs, mother hated dogs, they wanted a dog their whole life, and they couldn't get one, and it bummed them out, and it made them sad, and they don't talk to their mom anymore because of the dog situation. You will find out stuff of that extreme based on your personal questions asking, and what happens. It gives you a place of reference to where that person is, where they are emotionally, where they are mentally, where they are about the subject at hand, and, maybe why they were so distant in the beginning. But also, it opens the lines of communication, because then you begin to realize that this person is a human being. No matter what their initial quick response was, this person has feelings and probably most of the time does care. Okay, most of the people you come into contact with are not cold and freaky and just horrible people. Most of the time, 98% of the time, you're going to come into contact with somebody that has a real heart and soul and really cares. Now, whether or not they've been able to explore certain things or have the knowledge of certain things or understand or able to articulate or communicate is always something that may or may not be. But when you're able to ask questions and kind of take the guesswork out and allow for a place of reference with that person and open the lines of communication, you do everybody a big service. Not only does it go a long way to understanding them better, okay, understanding them, just that little bit of breaking the ice can open into a full-on conversation that you may end up learning so much about them and vice versa. And this is how I make great friends. This is how I understand people. It's not like prodding and digging deep and making them feel bad. It's about caring enough to ask those questions. Nobody's probably cared enough to ask why you haven't had a dog. Or no, on the flip side, nobody's really asked why you care so much about your dog. Because that other side of the coin could be like, she's freaky. She likes her dog way too much. Do you see what I'm saying? And when you show that you care, it goes a long way to people feeling good around you. It goes a long way to people realizing that you actually care to understand where they stand, what their past is, what they've gone through, their plight. Because we've all had a plight, okay? We've all had a plight. And until you ask the questions, you don't know. But we've all had a plight. We've all gone through some stuff that's been very difficult. And we've come out on the other side, and we've tried to overcome that. And when you really get to a certain level, when you decide you got to do that soul work, you do it, and you work with somebody, and you get to that next level because you don't want to take those bags anymore. You don't want to carry them around. So you begin to understand them better, and you begin to understand you better. Isn't that interesting? Because until you ask the question, you don't know where they stand. You can only make an assumption of why they said what they said. You don't know why. Once you begin to peel the layers back, you're able to understand better. Not only them, but you're able to understand yourself. Because then you realize either why you made that assumption, or you're able to understand, okay, I made an assumption and why maybe that wasn't correct, or wasn't right on, or from your own background, why you would feel that way or think that way based on that response. And when you figure that stuff out, then you start figuring out you. Right? Because really, when you break it down, it really is all about you. The way you feel and the way you think about yourself and every situation in your life directly reflects on how you feel about everybody else that comes into contact with you. Think about that comment. The way you feel about yourself directly relates to how you feel about everybody else. It's straight on truth. And so when you begin to understand yourself better and you're able to understand why you made assumptions or why you thought this or why you thought that or any of that stuff in between, you begin to understand your thought process better. You begin to understand why you thought that, why you felt that way, and is there anything that needs to be augmented, as far as your thought process and why you thought that way, or better yet, hey, I respect the way I feel based on this. But it opens that communication, that understanding with them and the understanding of you. And last but not least, when you do this, you tear down the walls of misunderstanding. You tear down the walls of misunderstanding and you open a dialogue that is healthy for everybody concerned. Because nobody wants to feel isolated. And everybody likes to be around other people because it matters to them. Tear down those walls of misunderstanding. Be the ambassador of peace and honest perspective. Live your true life perspectives. I'll be back this time in 3 shakes.